For those of you who are coming online here, voice trainer, this is Patrick Campbell. We're going to get to a round of introductions in just a second. But really what we're going to be talking about today is what in the world is going on. We're kind of 8 weeks ago or 9 weeks, depending on how you measure it. We all got kind of proverbially or figuratively, I should say, punched in the face, right? With a lot of indecision. What's going to happen? When's it going to happen? Like, is this going to go down? Is this going to go back up? Like, what's going on in the market, particularly our markets that we're in? And basically, we're past that initial phase of kind of freak out. So a lot of us probably, protected our costs. A lot of us, made sure that we kind of did a lot more modeling, maybe restruck what 2020 was going to look like. And now it's about what do we do now, or what should we be doing now to kind of really come out of this in a really, really positive direction. And so what we're going to be focusing on is giving you a bunch of insight, some data to kind of guide you through everything that's been going on. I don't want to say the word crisis, even though it's on this slide, because it's, hopefully less of a crisis now than we thought it was going to be 8 weeks ago. But to kind of guide us through the next, 45 to 60 minutes here, put together an awesome panel of some good folks. And I think all of you have better pictures than I do. And so it made me feel a little bit envious of kind of the artistic pictures that you guys have. But let's do a round of introductions, who you are, what you guys do, and then ultimately a fact that is not commonly known about you. Just to kind of mix things up a little bit. Jonathan,
sure.
Do you go by Jonathan? I feel like I've only referred to you as John. But maybe I've been wrong this entire time.
You've been horribly wrong. No, it's all right. But I do go by Jonathan.
All right, Jonathan.
Jonathan Ronzio. I'm CMO at Trainual. Trainual is basically where you build your business playbook. It's like employee onboarding, training, SOPs, knowledge management, all of that for small and growing teams. Fortunately, it's been a great tool for businesses during this moment, enabling remote onboarding, even ourselves actually, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit in this webinar. And I guess let's see, a fact about me that people don't know. So I don't come from a traditional SaaS B2B marketing space at all. Like the creativity that you see in our brand and content comes out of basically 8 years of me as an adventure content creator, a filmmaker in the outdoor industry, and even prior to that, a musician. And fun fact of COVID is like, it's because I'm not traveling as much, I've had time to lean back into music and record some new tracks that I'll be dropping again this year.
There we go.
Awesome.
I love it.
Love to hear
that was all code for he uses his job as an excuse to get cool gear so he can record cool tracks and do other fun stuff. That's really what that is. That's awesome. That's cool. Lisa, how about you out of Oakland?
Yeah, so I'm Lisa Abbott. I'm VP Marketing and Business Development at Wootric. And Wootric is customer experience management for the cloud. So in particular, companies that are pursuing product-led growth, where end user ease and productivity are so critical, we instrument customer feedback programs, including NPS, to surface and understand those points of friction that are happening in the SaaS customer journey so that you've got product, success, support, marketing, everyone can prioritize what they need to do to maximize customer value.
That's cool. Yeah, the Wootric, it's been fun to see the Wootric platform over the past number of years because it's definitely gotten from a place of, just more power. Like there's just so much power in terms of collecting, information and stuff. And it's been cool to see how that's evolved. But what's a fact that is not commonly known about?
Commonly known, I'm here in Oakland, I'm a city girl, but I actually grew up in Yosemite National Park. And,
that's cool.
That's where I spent my early years. And so I still have a really strong connection to nature. And that's where you find me on my days off is hiking and getting out and enjoying the wilderness. That's my thing.
That's awesome. We got a lot of outdoorsy people here. That's awesome. Cameron.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. So yeah, Cam Russell over at Trufan actually recently moved titles to growth marketing, and we are based up here in Toronto, and Trufan actually is running another platform called SocialRank, which is the easiest way to identify, organize, and manage your audience on social media, on Twitter and Instagram. And we're able to allow you to identify your top fans, influential followers, and then ultimately organize them to start taking action on them, build smarter influencer campaigns, reward your top fans and stuff like that. And an interesting fact about me that most people don't know is that prior to joining Trufan, I was doing going on 2 years of door-to-door sales before running into the head of sales here at Trufan out in Vancouver, which ended up getting me this job, and it's been a journey ever since. So
That's wild.
Yeah, big shift in things. Went from knocking on doors to now working on the SaaS business.
What were you selling door to door, if you don't mind me asking?
Two things.
Oh.
One I sold painting, and then the next one I did was pest control.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
A couple of door to door, that and like internet. That's what we've seen. It's kind of, so in Salt Lake here, half the population is
Yep.
LDS, and they go on
Yep.
their mission, which is, door to door selling, the hardest thing to sell, right?
Yep.
There is a massive amount of software companies as well as companies where their primary channel is door to door. Mainly because of the space. So there's a bunch of software companies that are basically like Sales Rabbit and some of these others, but then there's a lot of folks where their whole marketing channel is, door-to-door sales here. So it's kind of interesting.
Seems like the moment would have dramatically affected that, right? Like,
they're still coming. We're still
Really?
getting them in Salt Lake here.
Wow.
Yeah. There was a couple who came and they're still doing door to door. And I think so Utah, we never did a shelter in place. And so certain counties, I don't think they would be allowed to do that, but yeah, it was interesting. I think we had a pest control person come the other day, actually, and you didn't try to sell us. So, yeah. And then this is Patrick Campbell, CEO, founder of ProfitWell. We're going to tell you a little bit about ProfitWell just to give context to some of the data we're going to go to. But fun fact that's not commonly known, I'm going to keep the outdoorsy theme. So I grew up in central Wisconsin, and I grew up milking cows as a kid. So grew up on not like a full farm, it was a hobby farm. So it wasn't like the livelihood of the family, but it was still, even though we didn't get the livelihood out of it, it was still like, 5 a.m. wake up calls and things like that, which are, not so fun, although that's kind of where I am now in my life. So milked a lot of cows basically, which is a good way into software, right? So what we're going to do today is we're going to walk through, first up, some data. So just going to give you some data because essentially what we were doing, at the beginning of this is we were trying to look for some data to help guide us, very selfishly. And then we realized, just given the nature of what we do, there was, a way that we could actually provide this data not only for us, but also for all of our users. And so at ProfitWell, we focus on subscription revenue automation. So basically we plug into your billing system, Stripe, Zora, Recurly, Chargebee, Chargeify, whatever you're using, and basically give you access to a couple of different tools that help with your revenue. And our core product is this free tool that we have. It's called ProfitWell Metrics, where we plug it in and you give you access for free to all of your financial metrics. So, your MRR, your churn, your cohorts, and then we enrich your data for free with Clearbit and full context so that you can then basically segment to your heart's desire. And what's kind of cool about this is we now have about 20% of the entire subscription market using this product. And that gives us a huge bevy of data that we can study. And what's great about that is it allows us to kind of get this aggregate data so we can show you like how the market has kind of shifted. And the way we make money, there's a couple of ways that it's not important for this call. We help with churn reduction and pricing and things like that. But if you really want to be sold to, you can hit us up afterwards. But anyways, so what we did is the first thing we did is we put together this thing we're calling the ProfitWell Index, which is essentially an amalgamation of all the companies that are on ProfitWell. We threw out all the outliers, all the folks who had data faults, these types of things. We were left with about 15,000 subscription companies, and then we cut that data up in a couple of different ways. One is very similar to a stock index, where essentially we're tracking overall revenue growth on a daily basis for different verticals. And then the other is like physically tracking the new revenue or the lost revenue that is coming or leaving, these certain verticals on a daily basis as well. And so the first thing I want to look at, or we're going to show, is the overall index. So this is very similar to a stock index. Think about this as aggregating all of the annual recurring revenue of these businesses and then basically tracking that over time. And we can't show you the actual tens of billions of dollars, like how much it is. So we use an index like a stock index to kind of show you how it goes up and down. And what we saw is that all subscription companies basically had a flattening moment in the past, 8 weeks. Now, before, you freak out too much on this slide, it's one of those things where we've now seen this recovery happen in a very, very dramatic fashion, which I think is pretty cool. And so what you're looking at here, this is that, stock index that I was kind of talking about. And what you're seeing is essentially the growth since January 1st, 2019. So about a year and a half at this point. And you'll see obviously a big dip, but then all of a sudden now we're kind of back at the point where we're above where we were before the COVID crisis hit. And if we zoom in on this graph, so this is the same data, we're just zoomed in as of January 1st, 2020, you can kind of see that a little bit more dramatically. And, we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to, talking with the rest of the group and getting Q&A and things like that. But this is very promising, at least to me. And the other thing that was kind of cool about this, and it's not cool that there was definitely businesses that were hit dramatically and some businesses lost out here, is that a lot of this was driven by D2C. And so e-commerce as a whole is very much up and to the right. Subscription e-commerce had a bit of a flattening initially because there's a lot of people who kind of canceled their subscriptions just because they were like, I don't really need this right now. I don't know where the economy is going. But very, very similar to the overall graph, basically there's this recovery that's been happening. And there's some sub verticals within subscription e-commerce and D2C that actually have been doing really, really well. Media is doing really, really well as well. So, subscription media, it's very akin to the last election. So after the last election, there was this, huge bevy of people signing up for news sources. Very, very similarly, it's just such a huge news event that a lot of people were signing up for, not only supporting their news, but also like trying to get, read up on this every single day. And in the world of B2B, which a lot of us on the call here are, we saw that it was basically flat, but now recovering and going up and to the right again. And so what's kind of cool about B2B is that there's some resiliency with it. There's a lot of annual contracts in the world of business to business. And so you saw, there's definitely some flatness, and I'll do the zoomed in view here. And then all of a sudden, now we're kind of back up and to the right, kind of marching towards where we should be. And I think a couple of things to point out, like we did take a lot of outliers out of this. So there were some folks in this data set that, were serving gyms, for instance, and they just went to zero really quickly, right? And there's other folks in here who are project management or, the Slacks or the Zooms of the world who just went crazy in terms of growth, right? Just because a lot of people were going from work from home. And so we wanted to study not quite the middle of the pack, but mostly the spirit of what we wanted to find was, hey, how is this affecting most businesses? Not the ones who are absolutely getting crushed, and not the ones that are absolutely, doing really, really well. And just to kind of wrap this up a little bit before, getting into, some feedback from the group here, we wanted to look at specifically how new revenue was looking and how lost revenue was looking. And we'll look at this in B2B, but I can get anyone the D2C version or the subscription e-commerce version if they're interested. What was fascinating is that almost in every single vertical that we looked at, including B2B, new revenue actually accelerated. And this is kind of weird if you think about it, because the narrative was, oh my gosh, no one's going to buy anything anymore, right? And I think in some parts of the world, and I'm sure we lost some deals here and there, as an aggregate because of what was happening with COVID. But most of the time, what we found is that actually new revenue went up, and churn obviously was dramatically hit, but then it's been recovering. And so what you're looking at with these graphs, and this is a little bit of a complicated view, this top line is basically daily new revenue, so new customers or upgrades. And this bottom line here is daily lost revenue, so churned revenue, cancellations, and then downgrades. And you'll see that on the latter half of this graph, for new revenue, it's actually above where it was in January. And this dotted line is basically an average of 2019. And so it was kind of fascinating because when I looked at this, I went, oh, and obviously we didn't see this whole view, at the beginning of this, but it was one of those things where it was like, wow, like revenue's actually up, and it's not from, all of the most obvious folks, although there's plenty of like more obvious folks that are doing well now than ever. And then churn was just kind of a fact of life. Like everyone kind of reconsidered what was going on with their balance sheet, with their expenses, these types of things. And so this made net look, net revenue, so this is net growth, look not so good, but now it's starting to actually look really good because this is daily net growth. So basically the combination of those two previous lines. And basically you see this dip. It's very similar to those first graphs we looked at. And now we're back into a world of growth, or at least, above that line, which is good. So I think that for me, the founder in me is like, great, let's get going, optimistic, let's rationalize every decision now because everything's going to be great. I think the operator, the CEO in me goes, like it's a little scary still. And we don't know if there's going to be aftershocks. And, this is obviously not going to be like the 2020 we imagined, regardless of how it goes the rest of the year. But it's also one of those things where I don't know about the rest of you, but for me, I'm still probably considering purchases with much more scrutiny than I was before, which is hard to say because I was already really scrutinizing them heavily. And so it's one of those things that I think that regardless of, we're back to normal, quote unquote, in terms of growth, there's still a lot of, and I don't want to make, this dramatic, but there's still a lot of like mental after effects, I think, in how people are purchasing products and how they're thinking about their business that are really, really good for certain businesses and also really, really bad for other businesses. And so let me kind of pause there. I've talked enough here. Like, what do you all think? Like, what's your kind of take on this? What's some color that you can add? It doesn't have to necessarily be about this data, but what's your take?
I'm curious, when you say that you're hesitating on like thinking through like your purchases, are you talking about personal or professional purchases or both?
For me, it's definitely professional, like for the business. On the personal side, I think I'm probably, this gets a little too much into the psyche of Patrick. I'm probably a little like overthinking them anyways as well, because, I mean, I think two, if not all of you are bootstrap companies. And so like, you kind of get the vibe of like, hey, like this is, if we go out of business, I'm done, this type of thing. And so there's a little bit of that, false, like, everything's going to be terrible mindset that's going on right now on the personal side. But on the professional side, I'm definitely, we kind of went on a little bit of a budget freeze and only just to get more information. Like there wasn't a downturn in revenue. There wasn't anything that was dramatic. It was more just, we don't know where this bottom is. We don't know like how long it's going to last. And I think that's where a lot of companies went where, selling into someone right now, even if they're a great customer, it's one of those things where they're still going to be a little bit more hesitant. They're going to probably be a little bit more, stringent on procurement and these types of things. At least that's what we've kind of seen in our sales process for at least one of our products. For another one of our product, it's been kind of like everything's normal, which is, it was just kind of weird as well. But how about you guys? I know you guys pivoted, not really pivoted, but you changed your messaging up a little bit at Trainual, to be a little bit more remote focused. Cause I think before it wasn't as remote focused, but that just might be me not living in the trenches every day with you guys.
Yeah, for sure. No, and I ask about that just because I think it's interesting to see how people are scrutinizing certain expenses over others. It's like, every little software line item or something is like up for scrutiny, and yet like trampolines are sold out on Amazon.
That's true.
So like, yeah, it's really interesting to see like how consumers are thinking about the moment.
That's totally true.
But yeah, for Trainual, it's like very quickly we went from basically 2.5 years of just being a tool for fast growing businesses. You're hiring, you're growing, you're scaling, you're systemizing, right? Like that was the message. And immediately it was more about how do you keep your remote teams accountable? How do you get people up to speed and aligned and like give them the need to knows fast? And how do you onboard and train remote? And so, we took a couple weeks to kind of pivot that message in our ads. And in that time, basically like late March, when it started to all hit, I threw out our marketing playbook. And I'm somebody who I prefer to not overplan and not have things built out for an annual, forecast of what we're going to do with our marketing budget, et cetera. I like to be a little more in the moment. I guess that's why I need, it's the adventurer in me that's like ready to go out into the mountains, and I need the base camp managers who are looking at the weather and telling me where the dangers are. So it's a balance, but for us, we kind of killed everything that we were really thinking about, and instead just started pushing content and brand and doubling down on our focus on our customers and our team. But from a marketing and messaging standpoint, it was just all about how much free, valuable information we could put out there, and like pivoted, shifted from our like paid ads budget from 80% like direct response conversion focus to 80% just brand and content push, while we started to create the messaging pivots in the background to then meet us to the direct response with the new message.
No, that's cool. And I think that's a really big lesson that we've seen is your ICP, your ideal customer profile, might not change dramatically, but the messaging and the things they care about probably are changing, even if it's for a short amount of time. And a short amount of time might be 9 months, right? Because, as you guys are probably going to see, Jonathan, is there's a lot of companies that, as we've seen, just aren't going to go back to an office at this point, at least for the next year. Even if everything else is open, they're just like, yeah, screw it. Like, let's just, keep the offices closed for a while. And I think that that's
moved out this month.
Oh, did you guys close your office?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, our lease was
gosh.
up and we were looking for a new one before this anyway, but like this month, it just kind of was like, well, we don't have a new one and everybody's remote now and we're good. So like, we'll keep
That's
our eye
wild.
out for a good deal, but we're all remote now.
Yeah. That's interesting. There's probably a really good conversation we could have about remote, because I think that's been a fun debate that we've had internally. But before we get there, Lisa, like curious, like your general thoughts, but also what I appreciate about your product is that it's such an important thing, like customer experience and like really understanding that feedback cycle. But I don't think enough people appreciate it. And so I was wondering, like, are you noticing like any like, problems with like people, they were looking at this as a nice to have, even though it's like an actual crucial function? Or has it actually accelerated this where people are like, no, I absolutely need this because now we need to be more disciplined than ever on this type of stuff? Like what's kind of your take there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just and maybe an enhancement of dynamics that were already there. If you have a customer-centric leadership team, they're like doubling down.
That's great.
And if customer experience and that end user experience is not, if it's not something that the team is bought into, then it becomes one of those, a harder sell. Or it puts more onus on the champion who's approached us and for us to help them explain the value to their senior management. So yeah, obviously we think it's super critical, and that's kind of how the approach we've taken ourselves. When this hit, all the classic acquisition funnel growth metrics still important, but the last few months, I think, more than ever, we've been walking our talk when it comes to product-led growth and focusing on customer value. So we're looking at resource allocation through the lens of what's creating ease and satisfaction and loyalty for our customers. And those are the KPIs, those experience KPIs that are, going to drive adoption and retention. And then in terms of, growing the business, we're playing to our strengths. So we've always been about efficient inbound organic growth, get folks in the door, focus on retention and expansion, and then activating our brand promoters for support. So that's been sort of the overarching strategy, and it's played out differently in each function. I can say more about that later.
No, it's interesting. And Cameron, I know you're serving on the social side, a little bit more D2C brands, things like that. Like, what are you seeing? Because I know that they had a little bit of a freak out in the D2C with some of these cancellations, and then all of a sudden, e-commerce has just been going nuts, because a lot of us are now buying our toilet paper and all kinds of things, via subscription or just via e-commerce. Like, what have you kind of seen in your side of the house?
Yeah, definitely. I think as a company, where our focus went was actually taking the time to really identify, out of our 5 to 6 different ICPs that we typically see coming through the door, where are the people that are they need this product, and without it, they're lost. And we found that there was 2 main ones. There was large influencers that was looking to identify their audience better. And then those D2C companies that you mentioned that really relied on influencer marketing right now and understanding their audience segments within social to ultimately run their business. And so we started to see actually a lot more come through. I don't think we even saw a dip from revenue. We definitely saw a little bit of, there was some people pausing, budget freezes, but from the ICP that we identified, the D2C, once we really identified, these are the people that are they need this product, we just went all in on that. And as soon as we started to really uncover and look at where all those D2C companies within our company right now as customers, we started to notice there was a huge pickup on them. And we're actually starting to see some more on the higher mid-markets that are coming into our business that we wouldn't really expect, but since they're almost acting as a D2C, for example, there's a company that wouldn't really be into influencer marketing, but they see influencer marketing as a huge way to kind of adopt the D2C model really quickly. And so we're starting to see some of those companies come in. We get on the phone with them, with the success team, and they're not really touching or talking much about doing influencer marketing pre-COVID, but now they're like, how do we do it? How can you help us? And it's like, we can help you to a certain point, but now all of a sudden they're scrambling to get into the influencer marketing space. And so we've actually seen a huge increase in those people coming on board, in that D2C ICP for acronyms has been a huge surge for our business.
Acronym soup. It's always good.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. And there was kind of a question that just came up about this, which, Jonathan, you said you guys are serving a little bit more of the SMB side. Yep. Lisa, I'm fairly certain you guys are mid-market enterprise, but I could be wrong there. And then Cameron, you talked a little bit about this. Are you guys noticing, or maybe ask this, like, Lisa, are you noticing like sales cycles get a little bit longer, velocity going down a little bit, or is everything kind of, you kind of already alluded to this. And then Jonathan, kind of the same thing, like what's going on with velocity there in sales cycle?
Yeah, sales cycles are slower, just to be honest, so we're, we're taking the approach, it's been, I have to say, like our customer success team, it's just been their moment to shine these last couple months, and reaching out and taking the opportunity to just deepen a relationship and talk about how we can help and how we can be partners getting through this. And I think, sometimes it's actually been a catalyst for laying out a nice vision and growth plan, but it's been really more also about being practical about the timing of being able to implement that. I was listening, Brian Balfour is a advisor to Wootric, and he was on the A63 podcast recently with Andrew Chen, and he was talking about the filling up filling up a lake of monetization potential. And so we're thinking about that both in terms of our free plan, but also just with our existing larger companies. Like, there's going to be potential here down the line, and not to, just know it's going to take a little bit longer to see that potential through.
It's the pool concept, which I think is, it's something that Christopher O'Donnell at HubSpot, CPO over there, talked to. I don't know if he came up with it, but basically, you have these rivers, which are events, demand gen, these things. If you turn them off, the river, goes away, right? So events, the river of leads went away, and this pool is like, freemium users or free like users, doesn't have to be freemium necessarily. Maybe extended free trials, these types of things, or it's just like leads that are just in your, in your sphere of influence, right? And that's a big thing that, is a good strategy, I think, in general, but especially right now, if people aren't necessarily purchasing, but they're still moving, right? There's that pool of monetizable potential, which is a really weird way of saying it, but it's one of those things to really think through. Like, and Jonathan, I know you guys have played with free trial, but like, tell us a little bit about like what you're seeing on the SMB side, as well as, kind of your take on the pool concept.
Sure. So our target, focus is really in that 10 to 250 employee size space. And for that size business, the buyer cycle hasn't really changed much. The consideration of like when to start a trial or how to start a trial has a little bit, and I'll talk about that in a second. But for just, that size business, when they know they have this pain, right? When they are trying to train and hire or onboard or whatever, and like distribute knowledge, like they have this pain, and it's more of an immediate solution for them to go and find something to implement rather than go in. This is one of the things where like, I always appreciate the data, but I also kind of always lean into gut and intuition in a big way too. And early on, we saw that, like, we could go after the founders and CEOs and the owners, or there's of course the like HR professionals and the learning and development people. And the data in our app was saying like, hey, your best users are the L&D admin ops kind of HR people. And then when we pivoted our marketing to go after that, we saw acquisition actually slow because the people in those roles didn't have the buying authority to put in the card real quick. And so for like, what my intuition was saying and what I was betting on is that like, hey, we just need to connect with the pain that the owner or the leader is feeling so that they buy it. And then they tell the person on their team, hey, go test this, implement it. Right. But for our like trial habits, one thing we did in the last, 2 months really was, we have always required a credit card up front for the trial, thinking like, you're showing intent. If you're putting in a card, you're like saying like, yep, I want to get in there. It's probably the right tool. And that was what we leaned into. In this moment, people are a little more hesitant to put in the credit card. So we started doing a split test of people that just just put in your name and email and get started. And you have the same time frame of a trial, but then at the end is when it's like, now put in the card. And we're actually seeing better users, converting less percentage of the volume coming in because we're getting more volume that don't have to put in the card. But we're seeing better users opting in to put the card afterwards because they're getting in. They're like, yep, this is right. Now I want to go, right?
Yeah, it's super interesting. In the data, at least, you gave the intuition and I'll give like what we're seeing in data. Like what we've noticed is that if you split this data by ARPU or ACV, essentially, so price point, if you will, it's pretty much the same kind of flow. So this is a little bit more of a direct answer to, I think, Patrick's question. But sales cycles, we have seen, and we don't have enough data on this, but we've seen other people have published this type of data from like Proposify and some of the other folks that are out there. Sales cycles have gotten extended. So especially on the higher end, where people are a little bit more, they're adding a couple extra steps, procurement, these types of things. I know it's funny, we had some deals that basically started in the middle of this. So like 4 weeks ago, those closed very quickly. Whereas the deal that started before COVID hit, those right when this started, those took like the whole 8 weeks to close because all these larger companies were just, now we have to rethink things. Now the CFO has to approve it, and the CFO of the parent company has to approve it, and all kinds of stuff that was kind of happening there, which was super interesting.
Patrick, it is such a brutal time to be in sales.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just all your expectations have to be recalibrated, and
totally,
it's tough.
Do you, so Lisa, I imagine you have a sales team, like you have AEs and things like that sort. Cameron, Jonathan, do you guys have AEs or like traditional, for lack of a better phrase, sales folks?
We have one AE and one SDR. I mean, I think like 8% of any of our customers have talked to somebody in sales or less. It's more of a inbound acquisition, just kind of touchless model, and that flows into our customer experience team.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's just because there's been some really interesting questions around what do you do with quotas right now? Because if you lower the quota, depending on how it's structured, you might actually be paying them less, than their OTE, but they might not hit their quota right now. We personally did lower our quotas, not by much. And the way our model works is it's an unlimited model. So if they sell more, they'll get a certain percentage of those deals they sell. And our sales folks, they seem to be okay with that. And mainly because our lead flow didn't go down, which I think was good. Lisa, did you guys make any adjustments, or is it kind of touch and go depending on the month right now?
Yeah, no, I don't think there've been adjustments at this point. So we're just kind of steady as she goes and just watching to see how things develop further. But we're starting
a model that we've started to implement actually is, I'm sure everybody's familiar with like frequent flyer programs, right? Like you can get to Mosaic on JetBlue by taking X amount of legs or by getting this many points, right? There's a couple ways to like hit the status, right? And we've been thinking about that as like basically our comp plan of like, there's ACV or there's volume of accounts, right? And there's a couple different ways to actually get to where you want to go, right? And a combination of that can work.
Well, and sales comp is one of those things, Broberge, former CRO at HubSpot, talks about this a lot. It's like, sales folks are coin operated in a good way. I know some people say that in a negative way, but it's a good thing, right? You adjust the quota parameters and they'll go do what needs to be done to hit that quota. And so Jonathan, that's kind of like an expansion of the parameters, maybe to create more of these, accounts, that might not necessarily be, converting, but you may convert them down the road or something like that. So yeah, it's an interesting model. Another question here from Cam, and this might be good for you, Lisa. How are companies managing delayed or pushed renewals? So 14-month contracts, how are they tracking and weighting the probability of return? Like, I know you said your customer success team is crushing it right now, but you also serve, I don't know if customer success is necessarily who you sell into, but they definitely probably use the product on some level. Like, are you seeing anything in terms of, people pushing renewals and things like that?
Yeah, we're having some conversations, but it really depends on the sector. So we, customers of ours, like Zoom and DocuSign, I mean, they're killing it right now.
Yeah.
But then we have had, we have talked with other customers, travel industry, oh my God, that, needs some support. And, and back to our earlier conversation, about the long haul and being a partner and knowing that's going to come back. We've been having those kind of conversations with some in some sectors.
I think one thing or Jonathan, what have you guys seen, like have you guys changed, maybe a broader question is, have you guys changed how you have approached anyone who's trying to cancel, things like that?
Totally. I mean, it's been evaluated on a case-by-case basis with the account. When we look at the health score, it's like, were they actually activated in the product and going to cancel anyway? Or were they like really using and relying on the product and they're reaching out to potentially pause or cancel because they're really feeling the weight of this and that financial burden, right? So we do have the team evaluate that per account basis as it went. But, we did do deferred payments and also like applied, a few month coupons for just to like forgive payments for a period of time for some customers to help. Like, I'd rather keep them around than let them go, right? And if that means losing a couple months, then that's, now is a moment to, build fans. I think that's like we try to do with our content always, but that's also like, you can do that with your customers. Mm-hmm. And to Lisa's point about like being a partner, having a real relationship, being more than just a software that they use. And that's how you do it. You have empathy and understanding and like help them, right? And that creates fans in the long run that are out there raving about you and how you help them survive, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's the big thing too, is, whoever holds on to the most, users, customers at the end of this is going to win. And I think on the defensive side that you're kind of talking about, it's a lot of fundamentals, right? Like, you probably should have been doing some of that stuff. And I know you guys are, but like, as a business in the aggregate, a lot of business on the phone, you should have been doing some of this stuff before COVID hit. But it's, a good excuse to get that, that triage system in terms of churn, like in place. And I know we went out to some of our larger, we had a couple large subscription companies that, serve the fitness space. And we proactively went out and said, hey, we're going to just pause invoicing for you just because we know, you're getting crushed right now. And so, it helps engender some good brand and some good loyalty and some good trust there, which I think is really, really important. And on the offensive side, I think we've seen, and this is something where it's like super aggressive, but I think it's actually, probably beneficial. We've seen some folks who have, they're challenging incumbents in the market. Meaning like they're the up and comer versus a bunch of enterprise, or some old school companies. And they've been doing, basically buying out competitor contracts. So if they're talking to someone who is, hey, they got 9 months on the incumbent product, and they want to switch to the new product, but that 9-month contract, they're basically like, cool, we'll give it to you for free for 10 months, just get on board. Right. And I think that's kind of interesting because, there's probably a world where a year ago you were doing that anyways, but right now where top line revenue expectations have kind of gone out the window, whether you're funded or not, it's kind of a cool opportunity to do things that maybe you wouldn't have done, a year ago, because now you're like, well, I'm cool if I defer that revenue for 10 months, as long as I get them off of, incumbent product or something like that, which is kind of cool.
I think, yeah, you're so right about like whether you're funded or not, the expectations are like, you basically got a blank check for a few months to like go experiment in this moment and figure out like what are some new things you can do? What are some fun things you can do? How can you diversify channels or build, a different audience on a different platform, et cetera. And like everybody will kind of look at this like, oh, well, yeah, the whole world is, global pandemic. We understand, right? Whether it goes up or down. And like now might be the time that some companies are, like Cameron's talking about, like going into influencer marketing for the first time because they're exploring new things. And whether that works or not, now's the time to test.
Well, I think what's really cool about that though is that when I ask a lot of people if they've changed their product roadmaps, most people have not. Right. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Have any of you changed like your roadmap? Have you accelerated things you were going to build? Have you kind of taken things off the table? Like what's been the product side?
Yeah, definitely for us, we've made a big shift in focusing more on building out like actually a freemium model, which we didn't have before. And so adding that was like not even on the map. And now seeing like to, Lisa's point about building that pool, we're like, how can we build that pool? And I think a freemium model is a perfect way to do that. And our product's very suited for that, especially for like having a lot of influencers or people that care about their audience a lot, coming on and just seeing the feel of like being able to look at your audience in a completely different way that, you know, Instagram or Twitter doesn't traditionally give you. So getting that out there and putting that up front has definitely been something that we jumped on very quickly. We put out a test of our free product actually this week just to see what initial thoughts were. And now we're pulling it back, taking the feedback. And that's pretty much the only thing we've been focusing on in the last probably month now, as soon as we kind of made that decision to shift more from like upper market to more mid-market and SMBs, seeing that, hey, our ICP is influencers and D2C companies. How can we better cater to them, you know, right now? And building a freemium and building more products for them is something that we've been doing in the past couple months.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
We haven't made dramatic shifts in our product roadmap, but it's just sort of where we're leaning. You know, we're leaning more towards into features that are going to reduce friction or help our existing customers get more more value out of the product. You know, and that's also been part of these conversations we've been having. You know, what can we do to unblock a customer and, you know, a mid-market customer, an enterprise customer from getting the most value from their customer experience program. And then just things that you know, one of the things I'm super excited about as marketing is we're making some shifts to our sign up flow for enterprise users, you know, as they add more and more users over time, that's going to just make that easier, friction free. And yeah, I'm excited about it because I think it's gonna turn up that kind of thing is gonna show up in our metrics.
That's cool.
So,
Jonathan, any changes you guys make?
Well, we've accelerated big time.
Love it.
We actually hired 13 people in the last month and a half.
That's right. You said that.
And
what is going on there? Was
well,
that already planned or was it in the context of COVID?
So they were already on the, like, we had these hires on the plan for the year, but with the like massive exodus of great talent from all around, and also the fact that we can hire, you know, remote now, like our whole team wasn't remote first before. I'm in Boston, most of the team's in Scottsdale. We've got, you know, one guy in Tennessee, but like we have not been a remote first company. And now we kind of, you know, we are for the foreseeable future. And so that opens up the talent pool. Obviously, you know, Airbnb released their whole talent directory of like all these new, like, it's incredible the amount, like, very sad for the people losing their jobs, but it was incredible the pipeline that filled. And fortunately for us, we did do our Series A in November, and so we were kind of just like, well, let's just grab the talent when it's there. And so most of the 13 have been on the product and engineering team, and we've accelerated big time. So like for anybody who has seen or tried Trainual in the past or maybe hasn't yet, the whole app is changed, like total facelift. Everything is new next week. It's dropping in June, and there's tons of new features coming down the pipe. So yeah, we're hitting the gas big time right now.
That's cool. That's awesome, man. Couple other questions here. Patrick asks, for B2B companies focusing on large enterprise and running out of time and cash, do you think consulting, assessments, I'm sure professional services would be in here, as a good alternative revenue source? There's pros and cons, I know. What are your thoughts, or would you advise to try and move down market? As a company that has like a tech-enabled service, that's our price intelligence product, where it's, you know, software and, you know, service. I actually do think, and I might be biased here, that doing some service or assessments or pro serve, it's actually a lot easier to spin up. It's harder to kind of scale. So if you're trying to do it for like the next 6 months, I think that it's easy to spin up and kind of go after. Whereas going down market or moving into a dramatically different ICP, that's really hard. Now, depending on your product, Patrick, like I think that there's you know, some things that you can do there that maybe moves into another market. But it fundamentally just gets really difficult because the entire DNA of your company isn't there to serve the down market yet. And we found this out when we went from, you know, our enterprise kind of version of our product, the price intelligence product, to a freemium offering. like our DNA was just not there. And so we've had to work a lot in the past few years to kind of close that gap of, really just kind of, upscaling one end and still having some loops on the low end. So yeah, just some things to think about. Like any advice here, like Lisa, I know you guys probably have a little bit of pro serve in your product, maybe not, but like
we still offer a free plan that's really strong actually. For any startup on the call, you guys should check it out. If you're if you want to start an NPS program, you can do it. Plug Wootric into Slack, Intercom, HubSpot for free and get going. But what I will say is that I agree with you, Patrick. It's hard to then shift your company DNA to then move down market. It's nice to have a freemium solution that then can feed into growth as these companies mature. But having said that, we have this sort of free plan flywheel that we've just been letting the folks that are there sort of organically upgrade over time. And now, we're taking more time with those customers and looking more carefully at who's signing up and seeing who might get value from a paid plan, paying attention to that earlier.
Yeah. I think an easy thing you could do, Patrick, is, and this doesn't sound easy, but create a free version and just see what happens. Now you got to be careful because you're going to get, people who you should be selling the big dog contract to who sign up for the free plan. You have to make sure that the things in the free plan are just getting them in the door, not satisfying exactly what they need. And then there is a way that you can get a nice little flywheel going, as Lisa was saying, and that's what we have with our down market folks. But you got to be careful because what we found is that sometimes our content as well as our sales practices would kind of shift down, and we're like, no. The sales and content needs to serve the upper part of the market, even though like we got distracted by Johnny and Jane startups and things like that. So you just have to be careful with that. But it might be a good way to test, especially if you're in a position where you're like running out of time and cash, and you're ready to try some Hail Marys here, which I think are good ones to go after.
I think also the other side of the question around like considering service revenue, like consulting assessments as like a potential viable revenue source to add on right now. Yes and no. I would be careful about like if you're a traditional SaaS business, you want to be careful like how many toes you dip into the service pool, right? And I would think about it more from like
one toe.
Yeah, right. I would think about it more from like an R&D standpoint, right? Like it's okay to do some of that consulting and some of those assessments if that's how you're learning about like the content that you're going to create to better serve your customer, or it's going to inform changes to make to your product roadmap, right? Think about service as a small arm of R&D, not as an alternative revenue arm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that helps you not just do anything, and that's what we talked about the first couple of years of ProfitWell when we were called Price Intelligently. We would say, we're getting paid to do our customer development. And that also gave you like, we weren't going after a $500,000 contract where we needed to sit in the office for 5 days a week with the other person. Like, it helps kind of constrain that a little bit. That's a really, really good point. Couple little last, like maybe a little rapid fire here. Remote. We touched on it. Jonathan, you touched on it. Lisa, I'm pretty sure you guys weren't remote. Jonathan, you guys weren't remote prior to this. Cameron, were you guys remote prior to this?
No.
Okay. So no one here was remote prior to this. Are you guys going to stay remote, you think? Are you going to go back into the office? What's kind of the take right now?
I mean, for us, we definitely have like just found a good flow across all areas of the business. And we just aren't being rushed to make a decision. I think, Jonathan just not renewing a lease. Same with us. Like we were actually in like transition from office space to office space. And we just obviously haven't made that next move, and we're in no rush to. Like our team's at a good size that there isn't too many, restructuring things that had to happen when it first came on board. And so I where the business is going and where, the economy and in the world is going, I don't think it's that like necessary to do that. I think everybody's in a good mindset of like, okay, virtual is kind of how we're living right now from a social standpoint, because I think being in an office, the biggest thing that everybody does miss is that, human interaction, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we've done a good job. Every 2 weeks we have like a virtual cheers, which we call it, where we kind of hang out, not really business talk, more, social interaction, where we're planning for that human interaction per se, virtually. But we aren't making any initial decisions or rash decisions because we don't really feel like we need to right now.
Yeah, I would say we're similar to Cameron. We were always remote friendly. We really miss being together in the office. But the transition, like we were talking before the call, the transition to remote was pretty easy, and we're not feeling pressure to get back in the office right away. We're hanging on to our office at the moment. We'll see what the coming months bring.
Yeah, going back to like the the start of Trainual, right? Like we spun this out of my brother Chris's consulting company. It was like a little beta product that he had for some of his clients. And it was like the fall 2017, and I packed up my Jeep and built a bed in the back and drove cross country with my wife and the dogs, and like lived out in a tiny little Airbnb in Scottsdale, Arizona for like 2 months. Got this thing off the ground with him, and then came back to Boston. And since then, like, we've built the core team there, and I've been out there every month, but like I've been full-time remote, even though we've been building the local office. So, and then we, of course, work with different contractors and vendors, and have since also added, full-time team members remote, but more of the core team is there. So we're in no rush to find another office space and to like take on the overhead of that. We'd rather put that into the growth of the company because we can operate seamlessly remote. But we are keeping our eye out for maybe small space, or maybe we'll get a co-working thing that just allows like the local engineering team or local, whatever, a team to get together to like brainstorm, because there's, as efficient as you can be remote, there is just also a magic to being in a room with a whiteboard, right?
Yeah.
So we want to be able to facilitate that occasionally, and keep our eye out for where this goes. But we're, again, in no rush to sign a lease that locks us into millions of dollars over the next few years, right?
Yeah. I'll be the strong opinion. I think we are going to change. We'll probably be a lot, like Lisa said, like a little bit more remote flexible than we were, or work from home flexible. I think we're itching to get back to the office. And I think we've definitely rethought this, because obviously all these big companies are going remote, and, it hasn't affected productivity that much. But I think that we're probably, barring, additional data here, we're probably going to stay like, hey, we have these 3 hubs, Salt Lake, Boston, and Rosario. And, that's where we hire. And you have to be, we might change to a world where it's like, you have to be at least able to access, the office a couple times a week, right? For like meetings, social stuff. Or, if you want to, stay there full time, it's cool too. I think what we noticed is that there are some folks who discovered, oh my gosh, I love remote. And there's some folks who discovered, I never want to go remote again. And so it's one of those things that it's going to be interesting, because maybe those people who love remote, like maybe we can't hold on to them in the next 2 years. So it'll be interesting. But I don't know, the serendipity side that you kind of referred to, Jonathan, I think that that's something that we really value, because it's helped us a lot. And we worry about, and this is one of those things where, when you look at the remote surveys, the number one problem is always collaboration and serendipity. That's the number one, like, self-selected thing.
Yep.
And I think that there's ways that you can improve that and fix that. And, but I think that we haven't fixed that yet. And so we feel like we're in not the most fragile state, but we're in a little bit more of a fragile state in our trajectory. And so we want to make sure that we, make as many hedges as possible to get through that state. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Is going to be more popular, right? Like, I think it is going to come down to like building, like, what culture are you building? And is it that people can choose if, where they want to be? Do they move to the place, go to the city and go to the office because that's what they crave? Great. There's going to be a whole group of people who like that same thing. Or there's going to be these fringe roles that can operate wherever, right? Like, I come from a background of, before it was remote work, being a digital nomad. And that was just kind of, native to how I operated. So I'm comfortable with that. But I also, I agree. I think it's the way everybody works is shifted forever. And it'll be interesting to see if the hybrid model can work sustainably, or if it's just not, impossible to build a real strong culture with the mix of the two.
Yeah. All right, we got to get out of here. So let's go around the horn. Last thoughts, where folks can find you. If you want to plug anything, feel free to. Lisa, I'll start with you.
I get to plug something. Well, I will plug our free plan. If there's anyone on the call that's looking for our customer experience solution, wants to get started with NPS, please check us out. We have a fantastic customer success team that will support you and your free plan at this point. And just everybody stay focused on customer experience. And this is what's going to keep us all strong and drive the growth as we come out of this this incredibly wild economic time.
Cool. Cameron.
Yeah, definitely. I would like to say we have a free plan up and working, but not quite there yet. So I would just say check us out. Like if you're, again, a D2C business or any kind of related to influencer marketing, just check out socialrank.com. You'll easily understand, why so many businesses are flocking to use us. It's just something that isn't really available if you're looking at native analytics. And so if you're looking to learn more about the influencers you're working with, if you're looking to dive into influencer marketing, definitely check us out at socialrank.com.
Jonathan.
Yeah. Connect with me at Jonathan Ronzio wherever. I hang out on Instagram and LinkedIn a lot, but find me on any platform. I'm always there testing. Happy to jump into a conversation with you. And of course, you can find Trainual if you just Google us or of course, get a deal from the ProfitWell stimulus package. But one cool thing that we did right now actually is it's called the Playbook Challenge. And it's like 10 days teaching people, not even inside Trainual, at the end of it, it's like walk away with Google Docs and Sheets and whatever, if that's what you want. It's just about teaching the mentality and the principles of how to document and delegate what you do and build your business playbook. And so that's just at trainual.com/playbook challenge.
Awesome. Yeah. And good segue. You mentioned it. So I think my big thing is the fundamentals and just being disciplined. We didn't necessarily have to be as disciplined a year ago because things were, great. And so it's one of those things that just go back to those fundamentals. And then in terms of stimulus package, we brought a bunch of folks together to offer up, some good promotions. You can get up to 20% of your monthly recurring revenue in deals, which I think is great. And I just wanted to thank, all three of these folks. They're busy as all hell. They're getting a lot of stuff done on their own respective businesses. And so make sure you find them on LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever, and just give them a nice little shout out because, this knowledge that they're dropping, you might be like, oh, I knew that, or, oh, I didn't know that. But it's one of those things where we're all in this together, trying to help each other kind of push things forward. So we'll send out, their social information with the follow-up, the recording and the slides. But if there's anything else you need, just let us know and we'll keep cranking, and everybody stay safe, stay healthy, all that kind of fun stuff.